In this video, I'm going to show you how to join quilt blocks together, quilt-as-you-go style. So you're going to have your quilt block and you're obviously going to have a second quilt block ready to go. And this is how you're going to get them organized. So you can have a quilt block, quilt top here. So one quilt block. You're going to have some quilt batting. Now for the batting section, you'll want to trim it to the same size as your quilt block. So as you can see, I've got some excess over here and I'm going to trim that away. Now we have that trimmed away, I have some backing fabric for the back of my quilt block. And this is probably about 1.5 inches bigger than my quilt block. We will be trimming it down later, but do it about 1.5 inches to start with. Now, I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and I am going to free motion quilt a design onto my quilt block. And as you can see, I've done a really simple design. I'll flip it over so you can see the actual design. And as you will notice, I have not taken the design over to the edges of the quilt block. You will want to leave at least 1 inch empty space. But I'm not going to quilt all that just yet. I'm going to go back and quilt it a little bit later. So I have left more than 1 inch. But I'm going to take my other one over and I'm going to free motion quilt this design onto the quilt block. I am not paid nor sponsored to create this video. I use a Baby Lock Soprano sewing machine. I have my feed dogs dropped. I have my open toe foot on. I like to use for my free motion quilting. This design is extremely simple and all I do is half circles basically. I have some thread just wrapped around my foot there we go. And I just take these half circles all the way around my triangles. And then I'm going to do half circles again around this next layer of triangles. And you have to watch because these triangles, they have a lot of seam bulkage at the corners. What you're going to do is pin or grip with clips right sides together of the 2 quilt blocks. So these are 2 quilt blocks and I've gripped them right sides together. Now you're going to want to pull back the batting, pull back the backing on both sides because we just want to sew 1/4 inch down on these 2 quilt blocks to make it quilt as you go. Now that is stitched in place and we're going to press this down. I opted to press my seams open so they laid flat on each side. When you fold the batting over and if you find that there is an overlap, then we're going to cut that. So I'm just going to bend it over so I know where my excess is, because you kind of just want it to lay flat in between like so. And I'm going to cut the excess off. I don't know if you can see, but there is an actual line that I can put my ruler next to and cut this excess off. So as you can see, it's going to lay nice and flat. I'm going to fold one of my backing fabrics over, and I'm going to find where that center fold is, and I'm going to press it, and I'm going to create a fold line, a guideline of where that center is. Now on the other side, I'm going to bring that backing fabric down like so, and I'm going to fold the other one over the top. Now I know that this is the center of my seam, and I need to hide my raw edge, so I'm going to fold this one over and press, and then I'm going to fold it over with the already existing line that I pressed, and I'm going to press it again, so we're completely hiding the raw seam. This is what it looks like. I'm going to press it again. So this is the premise of Quilt As You Go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this down by hand, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to free motion the rest of this empty space. So I hand stitched this down like you would do a binding. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to fill this section in. So I've done some free motion quilting over the top of this so you can see what it looks like. You are going to see the seam. Quilt As You Go, you are going to see the seam on the back of it. The good point about doing Quilt As You Go is if you are elderly and you are struggling to push a whole quilt through a regular sewing machine, this is going to be one of the best ways of connecting your blocks together. So this is the front side. So as you can see, it's just a regular looking quilt at this point. And on the back side, like I said, you are going to see these joins. So basically, if you are making a Quilt As You Go quilt now, you can basically just connect everything exactly the same way, only as these sections are just going to get bigger, and you would connect your rows in exactly the same fashion. I am going to be creating a table topper out of this. I'm going to create a Easter table topper, and I'm basically going to be using this here for my binding, so I just fold it over and fold it over again like so. But that is basically what Quilt As You Go is, and how you go about stitching two quilt blocks together for this Quilt As You Go look. Like I said, it's going to be easier for elderly people or people who struggle to move that quilt around, because you can do your quilting on each block, and then you will join the two sections for Quilt As You Go together like I just showed you. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and do another Quilt As You Go section at the end here. So I've got 3 blocks on my table runner. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have lots of sewing and quilting tutorials, hundreds and hundreds in fact. So subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.